Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is our first episode of Trinis Abroad, the podcast where we explore and we discuss our unfiltered opinion about our life here in Canada. We have been living here for the past 5 years, and yes, we do have a lot of stories to tell. And it's time to discuss our experiences in this podcast. This is our first podcast episode where we discuss our first impressions.
So, before we get started, just as a reminder to all of our viewers that this is not an immigration guide. We have already documented our journey from Trinidad to Canada. And if you want further information on that, you can always follow our YouTube page, The Sirajas. This podcast is more designed for us to share our experiences as a Trini living in Canada and what life has been like and what we have learned. And if there's anything you want to know and you want us to answer, feel free to leave us a comment or you can even message us after.
Okay, thank you. So I do have some cue cards and a lot of questions. And in our later episodes, we're going to discuss questions that were submitted from the audience. But these are the questions that we gathered for the past, I would say, 2 years. A lot of people have been messaging us on different social media platforms, either comments or even DMs. Okay, so for our first question, how did we cope with the move and settling here in Canada?
So I would say our journey has been a little bit different to the average immigrant. We came here in the midst of COVID, in the midst of a global pandemic. So upon moving here, there were a lot more restrictions. Planning is key, having a very strong plan from even before you move to Canada. I would say start having those conversations about what you may want to set up or accomplish within the first couple of months and how you're actually going to get there. So for us, it was a little bit more meticulous planning because it was COVID. So we had a lot more steps to go through than the average person. But I found just researching, planning, reaching out as well to other trainees who have been here. But a lot of it is also just trying to understand, the new country that you're moving in. And a lot of that comes on your own. And you have to sometimes just figure it out and do your own research.
Yeah, so what we did for our research, we actually had a very stable and well-detailed financial plan because we were going into a new country during COVID. We were unsure of the job market, the living situation. We did plan for 6 to 8 months, a financial plan for that. All the different expenses that we may encounter, obviously, it was unknown, the kind of different things that we had to spend money on. So place to rent, furniture, and we had to have a strong financial plan to support ourselves for the first time moving into a new country during very uncertain time. As well as we did look on YouTube and social media, looking for people who actually did the move from Trinidad to Canada. And we didn't see much information. So we actually looked at other immigrants. I mean, Canada is full of immigrants, and we were looking at social media platforms of different people's stories and the guidelines of how to settle here in Canada and who actually made the move. We also reached out to our family and friends, our fellow immigrants who we knew from before who actually made the move to Canada. And they were, honestly, there was a strong support system. They gave us a lot of guidance on what we should do, but the onus is on yourself in being independent and having this plan for yourself. It's a different country, it's a different ball game. You need to plan everything in detail. And again, if you're thinking about us, you can reach out to us.
I think for me, like what I realized very early on is, as Trinis, we are very dependent on each other. We're dependent on our family. We're dependent on our friends to help us do any and everything. But moving away from that level of comfort from Trinidad to move to Canada, very quickly you'd realize you have to learn to be self-sufficient. You have to learn to be independent if that was not a strength. And you have to be able to make it on your own. And the first couple of months, I would say even up to the first 2 years, are always the hardest. It is the most difficult part of the journey for any immigrant. I think as well is understanding that there's a vast difference of traveling abroad to vacation versus living and settling is two different things. So for us, I think as well, we knew that very early on that this is not a vacation, that we are coming here to live, to sustain a life. And that's something you have to understand very early on that, there is going to be some struggle. But it's how you work past those struggles and how you overcome it that will determine, if you're able to make it through to the end.
Yes, and that's a very important point. And what I want to add to that is that you're starting over. You're not continuing your life that you lived in Trinidad, well established, probably established in your career. Probably you have a lot of education in terms of degrees, certificates. When you land in Canada and you're looking for a job, you're starting over. And that's something that you really need to pay attention to. And that's something that if you're not prepared, it'll hit you with a shock. So starting over is very, very important. Keep that in front of your mind. You move into a new country. And as Anjani mentioned, yes, you do need to realize that you're not on vacation. That leads us to our next question. I'll hand over to Anjani.
All right, so moving on to the next question. What was the biggest culture shock moving to Canada?
Well, for me, the biggest culture shock for moving to Canada, I quickly realized is that work time here is very strict and you could no longer be on trainee time. Yes, so that's something that we learned very fast. Once we started our first job, we realized that time and the first world country hustle is very prominent, and if you're not aware of it, trust me, the culture shock is there. You need to be prepared. When they say work at 8 a.m., work starts at 8 a.m. They're expecting you to be at the office, ready to work, ready to go. I've heard about stories about immigrants moving to a new country and the grind and the first world country life. That's something that is way different to Trinidad. You're no longer on vacation. You no longer have time to grab a coffee or grab something to eat and you reach to work on time. But you want to go have a meal or have breakfast and stuff. No, I'm not hating Trinidad. It's something that I miss. But it's not like that in a first world country.
I think for me as well, what I learned very early on is that Canada is very fast-paced, it's very dynamic, and so is the work culture here. People are always on the go, and one thing very quickly is that you realize working hours have a different meaning here as it does to Trinidad. You know, in Trinidad, we think that everyone works the same hours, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We all have lunch the same time. In Canada, everyone has different working hours. There are persons who work different shifts. There are persons who work weekends. And then as well, the average person also may work more than one job at a time. So that was also something new to us. If I look back now at 5 years of our journey where we had worked in Trinidad, I think for us it was a smoother transition because we already had that work ethic instilled in us. And I think that is credit to the companies we were fortunate enough to have worked for. And it was just a smoother transition for us. We already had that. But I think for any new immigrant who's not accustomed to that grind and accustomed to fast-paced, dynamic work environments and always working around the clock and having, to be very vigilant about deadlines and sending emails on time, it will be a little bit harder, I think, for those persons initially.
Yes, I agree. I've seen a lot of people complain about the demanding jobs that they have, and I have worked for companies where it is a bit flexed in terms of their understanding that people have things to do, pick up kids, they have to take sick leave, they have to take medical leave, they're understanding. But at the end of the day, it's all about work. And you're expected to be at work and you're expected to deliver. They're paying you. You're considered as a resource, as much as that may be a hard thing to say. You're considered as a resource and you need to pay special attention to reaching to work on time and delivering on your deadlines. Okay, so on the same topic of the work life here, what about the lunch hours? I mean, that something I quickly seem to realize that you could no longer take 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, 90 minutes. You want to step out to grab something to eat, you end up in traffic. Here is, as I said, work deadlines. And how did you cope with the new lunch hours and not being so flex on lunch hours? I know that it's only 30 minutes unpaid time you get for lunch and some companies, but some companies allow you for 1 hour, but out of the 1 hour is just 30 minutes that is paid. And that's something that I realized, like, wait on, you can't take a longer lunch hour. I can't be stuck in traffic getting fast food. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that was a big shock for us because, in Trinidad, it's a little bit more laid back. Typical lunch hour is about an hour And, sometimes maybe, you're in work, but, you want to have a special lunch offsite with your coworkers. Like that just sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. And it is a little bit more rigid. So the minimum requirement for a break at least in Ontario, is 30 minutes unpaid. That's a minimum. Depending on the company you're employed with, you may end up getting 1 hour, but the full 1 hour may not be paid. And that also brings us to a change in the total hours of work. So typically in Trinidad, you would work probably 8 to 4 and you'll get a 1 hour lunch break, out of the 8 hours. Here, it's not like that. So if 30 minutes is unpaid, you're not working from, 8 to 4, you're working from 8 to 4:30. Or in like most other cases, the working hours are typically around 9 to 5:30. So that was another like big shock for us as well.
So for our next question, maybe a little controversial, I want to ask Anthony this. What about, have you ever been asked, are you from India?
Yes, I have been asked that. What I would say though, for the majority of persons I've met here, I have not received that question, but I will say it always comes from the same subset of immigrants who live here who ask me that question. Depending on certain communities or certain cities that you may visit, at least here in Ontario, sometimes you may get that question. I think that was a big shock for us. Coming from Trinidad, we kind of assume almost that everyone knows where Trinidad and Tobago is located, kind of almost assume that everyone knows a Trini. But coming here to Canada, I realized very early on, sometimes how much of a minority Trinidadians are, because we don't make up the majority of immigrants here. Even though you would always hear, your Trini friends or your family say, yeah, I have Trinis living in Canada. And you think that Canada is like maybe not as big, but it is. I did have a couple of those instances very early on when we first moved here, where I was approached by, some persons who made that assumption about me just based on the way I look, immediately even started to speak to me in a different language. And that was like a complete shock to me, because I was like, why are you speaking to me in a different language? And only when I started to speak, this person realized very early on, oh, okay, she's not where I thought she was from. It just made me feel a little bit more, I guess, self-aware as a Trinidadian, like who we are and, where we're from. And I found, in a lot of conversations with speaking with these persons who assumed I was from that country, I realized that they don't know about Trinidad. As much as I would try to tell them about Trinidad, the only things they seem to know about Trinidad is, the West Indies or Brian Lara. I remember a lot of times it turned into a history lesson trying to educate, persons about, Trinidad and why someone who may look like me can come from a place called Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. And I'm always very happy to share more about Trinidad and, why there are persons who look like me and other ethnicities who come from Trinidad. And to them, that's not the norm. For them, that's like a culture shock in themselves, because they would never think persons who may somewhat have some physical resemblance can come from the Caribbean.
Yeah, so I want to add to that. Yes, I've been asked if I'm from India or which part of India I'm from. And I just kind of reply, I smile, I nod. And I'm like, I'm Caribbean. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. And often enough, as Anthony mentioned, I have to go through a history lesson of where this is. So don't assume that everyone knows a Trini. But chances are they probably know someone from Trinidad. I've also been asked, oh, Trinidad is in the West Indies. Yes, it's in the West Indies. It's inside Jamaica, right? I'm like, no. The Caribbean is a collection of islands. So I was like, if you have a map, I'll show you. I pull up Google Maps and it's like, oh, yes, I know. So you're part of South America? No. So that's where we have conversations, and that's where we try to educate people of where Trinidad is. But chances are they are very friendly and they are very welcoming. Now, that's something I want to mention also too, is that Canada is the home of immigrants. It's run by immigrants. So chances are you're going to meet someone from a different country. I've met people from all over the world. I've met people from Russia, Bulgaria, Iran. Like a lot of people speak different languages, and something that Anthony mentioned, they were speaking in different language. Often enough, people here, because it's immigrants, they actually say, "Oh, what other language do you speak? Does Trinidad speak English?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's my first language. I speak English, right?" And they're like, "Oh, I speak like 5 different languages." I was like, "Oh, I just speak English," and that's something that is a culture shock as well. So that's why Canada has two languages, so French and English, and also to be from our schooling, a lot of people in Trinidad they speak Spanish. Some people speak French, but generally it's English, right? So I told them the official language of the Caribbean is English, and I speak English. So that was a culture shock there. And sometimes, weirdly enough, anytime we go and when we explain that we're not from India, they say they have a little puzzle look on their face, like, "Are you sure you know you're from India, right? You look like me, or you look like this one, or whatever." But chances are they're very friendly and they're very welcoming. But it's a culture shock here that a lot of Indian immigrants actually make up the diaspora here in the country and the region that we live. We live in Mississauga, and so that's one thing I want to touch upon. We're not from India. We're from Trinidad.
Okay, moving on to the next question. What do you miss most about Trinidad?
That's a tough thing. I have a long list, but what I miss most, obviously, my friends, my family, my mom, and everyone else who was close to me. I don't have a small group of friends. I miss each and every one of you. But more importantly, my belly. I miss the Trinidad food. It is different here. Even if I try to cook it, even if I try to buy it at fast food restaurants, it is not the same. I actually miss home cooked food from my family. So that's one thing that I miss a lot. Also, to even the Trinidadian restaurants or the Caribbean restaurants here. Often enough in Trinidad, sometimes, you're feeling a little snackish. And I think the culture is there where you're on your way to work, you want to stop, you get a pie, man, you want to stop and you get some bake, you want to come and get a doubles. Oh my God. That's not the culture here. These Trinidadian restaurants or even Caribbean restaurants, the culture here is that they open like midday for lunch. You may get dinner, you may get doubles for dinner. And you don't really want that. So that's something that I really miss is like on your way to work, you stop out, you get something to eat, roadside food. But here it's different. The culture is different. They have like in-store restaurants. There isn't like people selling at the side of the road. There's like quick pickup. You pull up to the next side of the road and you get some food. That's what I miss. And I think it's a kind of a good thing that it's a little healthier here in Canada. You kind of watch what you eat. You have a variety of getting things. It may be more expensive. Like I pay, I think 6 Canadian for 2 doubles. If you want to do the calculations, that's a lot. So that's something I miss. I miss the Trini food. I miss home cooked food. Nice warm food. I miss it. But sometimes we try to make our own traditions here at home and make our own cuisines. And we try to make some Caribbean food, but it's not the same. And that's something I really miss. So what about you? What do you miss?
I agree with you. I miss Trini food. I think there's nothing like Trini food. Like you can try and have Trini food here and it's just not the same. And even like having your home cooked food that you would have, I mean, you can try and make it here, but it's just not the same. I think for me as well, I just miss the laid back culture that Trinidad has compared to Canada. Everyone here is always on the go. Work life here is number one, literally. And I just find that, what Trinidad has, a little bit better or an advantage over Canada is that, we define what is work-life balance. We work hard, but we play harder in Trinidad. And in Canada, to me, that balance doesn't really exist. You have to create that. And I just miss my family. I miss hanging out with my friends, my coworkers. I miss my cats. I miss probably, and this is, as a Trini, like you don't appreciate out of everything. I would say being a Trini, you don't appreciate this until you leave. And that's all the holidays that we have. Yeah, like that's one thing as a Trini, I miss the most is all the holidays compared to like Canada. I think Canada has probably like a quarter of what Trinidad has, but I really miss those times. But,
The holidays is one thing, but what about hanging out? We mentioned earlier in the episode that the work life here is very hectic. The culture is not here in terms of you could meet up with your friends after work, go out and have a beer or have something to eat, catch up Friday evening. For me, the Friday evening lime, that's what I miss because people don't do that here. Because often enough, people work late on Fridays and they actually have to go to another job. Sorry to say that's how the work life is here, and they don't meet up. So we actually have our own traditions. We do certain things on Fridays or on weekends just to get a break. We try to create our own balance. I know that companies do say that there's a work-life balance. They try to promote that, but at the end of the day, it's different. It's not Trinidad, and the work life is not there. The work-life balance is not there, and trust me, the holidays aren't there because we barely get any holidays here, and that's something that you have to realize as soon as you land and you still only start your first job, you realize that it's pace.
And I think one last thing, again, as a Trini, that we take for granted, and only until you come Canada, you realize how much you miss this. And that's the sick leave. For all my Canadians watching, sick leave in Trinidad is paid. Unlike at least in Ontario, it is not paid. Some companies do provide paid sick leave, but for the majority of it, the minimum requirement, at least in Ontario, it's not paid. So it's not like, you're back in Trinidad and you wake up with the flu and you just you can't go to work, or maybe you just wake up on your wrong side of the bed and you're just like, I don't feel like going to work. It doesn't work like that here in Canada, because if you are sick and your employer is not paying you for that sick leave, you don't get paid. So that just goes to show you how different the mindset here is compared to like Trinidad when it comes to work life. Work is number one here. For me as well, it's all the gatherings, all the social limes that we would have in Trinidad, Trinis, we can create a lime for anything. Holidays are a big thing for Trinidad. And I remember having to explain that to a couple of coworkers when we talk about, like Christmas. I realized that, for us, Trinidad, Christmas is probably after Carnival. It is like the biggest holiday for us. It's all about family and friends and good food and drinks, and it's just not the same here in Canada.
Also, too, Canada is very cold, and I do miss the warm weather, but I don't miss it as much because I don't really like warm weather. The thing is, Canada is cold. 7-8 months out of the year, it's like between 10-15 degrees to minus. And it's something I had to get accustomed to quite fast, quite rapidly. It's something that we need to mention, is that Canada is very cold. It gets really dry. The climate is different. Sometimes you can get nosebleeds. Your skin peels. You have to stay warm, hydrated. That's why it's very important to have a doctor, and getting these services ready as soon as you land is very important. That's something I want to mention, is that it is not the same. Because one more thing before we go out to this question is that there are beaches here. There aren't any beaches because there's lakes. There's a lot of lakes in Canada. It isn't the beach like Maracas or Las Cuevas or even like Pigeon Point. It's different. I had the opportunity to try to venture into the beach, and trust me, it was like 35 degrees, and I went into the water. It was the coolest water I ever felt in my life. That was the coolest water I ever bathed in. So the beaches here are the same, and the last time I bathed in a beach was when I went to Trinidad. So that's something that I really miss, is like you could have easy access to the beach, and sometimes we take it for granted. But if you're a beach person, obviously, so I'm a beach person, I like water, so that's something I really miss. So on to our last and final question. So we'll hand it over to Anthony.
All right. So for our last question, do you feel Canada feels like home now?
Ooh, that's a tough one, but yes. Something that I thought about, I know when we're preparing this question, is that it is home right now, and it does feel like home, but it took a lot of adjusting. So something that new immigrants, if you're listening, Canada is your home right now, and if you wanted to make it into your home, you have to make the effort, because it's different to Trinidad, and so you have to make your own adjustments and your own routines, your own habits. You have to find different ways in terms of working. You have to find different ways in terms of traffic, the systems here, the banking system, the health system. It's something that you have to get accustomed to, whether it be good or bad. You have to get accustomed to it. It's different to Trinidad. Sometimes it could be more efficient. Sometimes it could be the death of you in terms of debt, because the cost of living here is very high, and it's something that you have to manage. If you don't, and you spend wildly without a sound financial plan, without a steady financial plan, without a partner by your side or a support system, it could be very depressing. So something that we quickly learn is that we support each other. We have a nice support system in terms of mental stability, mental health, There's something that you need to pay attention to, and it's something that helped us, and helped myself. I'll speak personally, is that now it's home, and it's something that you have to change. You have to change your mindset, and it is not Trinidad, it is Canada, and it's a new environment, a new way of working, a new way of how everything is done. Trust me, a lot of things are different here, and things that we said that you take for granted in Trinidad is no longer available here. But you have to find your own norms, and sometimes you have to find your own way to make it work for you. And every immigrant has a different story, and every immigrant has their own different experience of what their work life was like and what their life was like settling in Canada. And everyone could tell you a different story about different things that they've experienced. But at the end of the day, you have to make it into your own, and it's up to you to make this your home if this is what you really want.
Yeah, I'll also say that, home is what you make it to be. For the first year of any immigrant, Canada may not feel like home, because the first year is usually the hardest. You're running around a lot. You're trying to settle things like trying to find housing, trying to find a job, trying to get adjusted, finding a routine. That does take some time. As Surin said, it all depends on you. If you are willing to put in the work, you're willing to make those sacrifices, and you're willing to become adjusted and adapt to the new way of life here, then you'll slowly feel that Canada can be more and more like your home. Being here 5 years, I would definitely say Canada does feel like home. But at the same time, Trinidad is still our home. So in a way, I feel like we now have a second home being in Canada, because Trinidad is always going to be our first home.
Yes, and that's very important. Some people, when they think that they move into a new country, they're leaving the other country behind and they're not going back. Obviously, we want to visit our family and discuss and experience all the different things that we just mentioned in this podcast. It is home. We have 2 homes right now, and Canada does feel like home because we made it into what is comfortable for us. And that's something that is very important to note. It's sometimes like I see immigrants move here and they have a hard time coping because they think it's their old home. They're looking for the experience of what they had in their home country. You're not going to get that here. And that's something that you need to get out of your mind. It is not your home country that you came from. There are different laws, a lot of different things. So you have to make it into what you want to be comfortable in, and you have to adapt. If you don't adapt, you're going to have a really hard time.
And what I would say as well, Canada will never be like Trinidad. Trinidad will never be like Canada. But as a Trini living in Canada, I think there are ways that you can take a bit of your home with you as you move into a new country. And that's what we have done. And that's what I've seen other Trinis do. We have taken a lot of our Trini traditions and we brought it over with us. And it still feels as if, we still have part of Trinidad with us living here in Canada.
Yes, so this was our first episode of our podcast. We had a lot of fun recording this for you all. We do have episodes coming up, and if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and comment down below. Follow us on our social media platforms. We do have a new Instagram page just for Trinis Abroad, and the full video will be viewable on YouTube. So if you want to get access to the full video, please like, subscribe, and comment, and stay tuned for our next episode of Trinis Abroad. Bye for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.